Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Free Rotation podcast. I'm your host for this episode, and I'm joined with...
What's your name as the host?
I want to...
Hi, I'm people.
Just inserting like a blank...
Hi, I'm me.
You also sound like you're asking a question. Welcome to the Free Rotation podcast.
Hello, and
I'm your
here's
host.
a podcast. I'm Becky, and I'm joined with Angie.
Hello.
And Chris.
Hola.
And we're on day 178 of Where is Bobby? We've started a GoFundMe page. It hasn't been funded, and we haven't actually started it. But if you do happen to spot Bobby, we're still looking to find out where he's at and if he's still alive.
And I'm not advocating violence, but I will give you $10 to kick him in the dick as hard as you can when you see him.
I wonder if people think we're joking, but we're legitimately not joking.
I will legit track you down and give you $10 to kick him in the dick.
Yeah, like we just haven't, like, we saw him vaguely at a restaurant one time, and that was about the last time we've seen him. So
Yeah, we've got our own true crime. Bobby
the
crime.
We could have an entire episode where we just make up shit about where Bobby is.
So he's still liking girls' pages, so I assume he's still e-thoughting it the fuck up. But from whatever prison he's locked in, he has his phone and hair accessories.
He kegled a phone into like the prison and is now holding.
Did you say kegled or did you mean keistered?
Kegled.
No.
Well, he can't kegel it
He
in.
can't.
He can keister it though.
It's like that time Becky said her prostate hurt.
You know, he talked about his bussy a lot though.
That's his
that's
butthole.
keistering.
That's his keister.
Okay, listen, guys. I got confused. We're doing a true crime episode. And, you know, this is a pretty famous one. A lot of people know about it. But it is one that has been, I don't know, it's been extensively covered, but it's an old one. So we're talking about JonBenet Ramsey. And surprisingly today, it is August 6th when we were recording. Today is actually would have been her 32nd birthday.
32nd birthday.
So... way to bring the episode down from keistering to talking about dead girls. Mm-hmm. Anyways. What?
Samesies.
Anyway, so I'm sure a lot of people have heard the story about JonBenet Ramsey, but a lot of the younger people may not have the extensive knowledge of what happened. I think all of us, we were all alive when this went down. And it was covered as much as 9/11 was probably covered when 9/11 happened. JonBenet Ramsey, if you don't know, was a 6-year-old girl who was born in August of 1990 to her parents, Patsy and JonBenet Ramsey. She had an older brother named Burke, but had 2 half-siblings, one of which was named Elizabeth, who had passed away prior to her birth. So she had grown up in Atlanta, but in 1991, the family actually moved to Boulder, Colorado, as John Ramsey was the chief executive of a computer company, I believe, called Access Media, and that had actually become a subsidiary of Lockheed Martin. So this is just some background history about the family itself. And during that time when she lived in Colorado, which was actually kind of an important point at the time in which this all happened, her mother began enrolling her in a lot of child beauty pageants. So if you are not familiar with the story, but you've probably seen the picture of her if you've ever done anything adjacent to true crime, you see the picture of her. She has like frilly, really like big blonde hair, child makeup. She's sort of the poster child of what child beauty pageants were in the 90s. Mm-hmm. As a matter of fact, she actually won her first one when she was 4 years old, which...
Yeah.
It's real creepy.
It's real creepy.
Patricia Ramsey was Miss West Virginia. At one point, she was hung up on beauty pageants, and she wanted JonBenet to win.
Yeah.
And to achieve what she couldn't achieve.
Yeah, so she started really young. She had achieved a big following in the child beauty pageant circuit, which is kind of weird when you think about it, in my opinion, but that's kind of important because that does foreshadow into a lot of the story itself. She actually it was a huge theory surrounding her death, if you were following what was happening. So in 1996, the family is living in Boulder, Colorado. So on December 26, 1996, as the family is living in Boulder, Colorado, so Patsy Ramsey actually woke up to discover that her daughter had been missing out of the home and had discovered what was a 2.5-page ransom note. Now, to just back up a little bit, she had woken up, it was about 4 o'clock. She had woken up about an hour before she had discovered the missing ransom note and that her daughter was missing. So it was about 5 o'clock in the morning at the time in which that she had discovered JonBenet was not in her bed and that there had been a 2.5-page ransom note that had been left. The ransom note itself was fairly long in consideration to what a ransom note normally looks like. You know, if you ever picture a ransom note, you see like 4 sentences like, have your daughter, leave $50,000 at this location. We'll contact you. That's generally what you see whenever you hear sort of ransom notes or any idea of what it is. This one was like 2.5 pages long. It was asking specifically for $118,000, which was strange at the time because John Ramsey had just received his Christmas bonus check, and that was for $118,000. So there was a lot of early theories prior to the discovery of JonBenet that this was somebody who worked inside of either Lockheed Martin or Access Media. The ransom note had some weird punctuation to it. It was noted that at the very end it said victory, exclamation point, SBTC. That's how it was signed. So nobody really knew what that designation meant, but it would play a part in some of the suspects later in the story. At what was against the ransom note itself, Patsy Ramsey actually calls law enforcement. The note had stated, don't call law enforcement, we'll contact you, blah, blah, blah. Calls law enforcement. Law enforcement shows up, and they start to look around the house. They start to look for signs of forced entry because initially what they're thinking, what has happened is JonBenet has been kidnapped, and so they're trying to figure out exactly how it could have happened. They look for in the house. There's an officer by the name of Officer John French who helps preliminary inspect the house. They're looking for signs of forced entry, if there's any broken windows, anything like that. During the initial search, they do discover a broken window in the basement, but John Ramsey states that actually happened a few months prior to this incident on December 26th, where he had actually broken the window because he had forgotten his keys, and so he'd come in and gotten his keys that way. So that was the only initial sign of forced entry. Officer French, while he is searching the house, comes to a door that is in the basement. It is looks like a locked door with a wooden latch on top of it. And he initially pulls on the door, sees that it's locked, and doesn't think anything of it since they're looking for signs of forced entry. So during this time, now about 8 a.m., the Boulder police detective, I believe her name was Linda Arndt. I will fix that if that is not correct. But the Boulder police detective actually shows up to investigate that. Friends and family show up to the house. The house is full of people. They're waiting for this call about the ransom note and what the amount of money and all this stuff. People are cleaning the house. The only room at this point that is actually contained for evidence is JonBenet's room. So on the cuff of it, everything is kind of screwed up. There's people cleaning up the mess that had been left from Christmas the night before. There are people walking around the house. It's just an absolute chaos because they're initially thinking, hey, this girl has been kidnapped. So they're not thinking preservation of evidence. Stupid, but that is what happens. Well, John Ramsey and another officer start to do another sweep of the house. This time, John, and this is about 1 o'clock in the afternoon at this point, John actually goes to the room that had the latch on it, and it's the cellar to the basement, opens it, and finds JonBenet. And preliminarily, you could see that she is wrapped in a blanket around her torso. She has a homemade garrote. I can't ever say the word right. Garrote, which is basically a nylon rope with 2 handle brushes pulled against her neck. She has trauma to her head, and there are signs of possible sexual assault. But they're never able to truly determine if there was any at that point. They find her body. He actually picks her up and takes her upstairs. Where they think
and he took the duct tape off her mouth.
Yeah. She also had duct tape across her mouth. And initially, just to see if they can resuscitate her. But at this point, she's actually been dead for a few hours. And I think the autopsy showed that she had been dead at least maybe into the night of Christmas and probably into the early hours of the 26th.
Right. He said she could have died anywhere between 10 to 5:15 a.m., but closer to 10.
Right.
10 on Christmas Day.
Right. So this sort of spurns into this whole craziness, a media sensation. When the autopsy actually comes back, or the postmortem examination comes back, they found that she had been strangled twice with a nylon cord, which had been tied with a piece of paintbrush from the basement. Presumably, it was actually for leverage to sort of pull harder. And it was under the guise of that rudimentary garrote, as we were talking about. There was also clear signs of blunt force trauma to the head and signs of possible assault. And then they were able to see that she actually had an electrical burn to her cheek, and she had possibly been tasered. The cause of death was officially ruled as asphyxiation by strangulation associated with cranial cerebral trauma. I can't say garrote, but I can say cranial cerebral trauma. That's a harder word, but so this completely turns into a media frenzy. There's a lot of unanswered questions about what happened the day in Christmas of 1996, and then the hours leading up to her being found. So initially, it was pretty much determined very early on that a lot of people believed that the parents had done it, Patsy and John Ramsey. The initial theory to why they thought it was the family is that, as stated before, Patsy Ramsey was known to be kind of not a helicopter mom. What are they called? The moms that are like super intense about certain things. I don't think it's a helicopter mom, but like tiger mom, I guess it would be more of the appropriate stance. There was a theory that she had gotten mad at JonBenet and hit her. There was a theory that John Ramsey was molesting his daughter and had covered it up. There's a lot of things that didn't make sense at the crime scene that later came out through the media. The ransom note itself initially, the fact that it was a 2.5-page note was really strange. It was really strange the fact that the amount of money was being asked was specifically to John Ramsey's Christmas bonus. On top of that, there were a lot of people who believed Patsy Ramsey actually wrote the...
So handwriting forensics proved that it was a lot of the characters were shaped in Patsy Ramsey's handwriting. They also said the psychology of it was female. And also there were like some really easy words misspelled, but the more difficult words were spelled correctly. Plus, the ransom note was very well punctuated and grammatically correct, which, attested to a high level of education. And then there were some really weird words used, like hints and...
Yeah, like fancy words. There's also the fact that the ransom note was actually written on a notepad and pen that was found in the home. It belonged to the Ramsey family. And there was a draft note. So it wasn't just the fact that you had a ransom note. You also had a draft of that note found in the home.
Yeah, and it was written on a very unique type of paper that's only artists use, a capsule or however you pronounce it. It actually had to be taken out of a tube and used. It was written with a Sharpie. The paintbrush, by the way, was from her painting studio.
That's what I was going to say. The paintbrush was actually located in her art supplies. They located the bristles of the paintbrush, but they weren't able to actually locate like the second part of the brush, but they could tell from the garrote that it was the actual paintbrush itself that belonged to Patsy Ramsey.
And then Nancy Reagan.
Nancy Reagan.
Damn it, Nancy Reagan. Always up to shit.
Just say no, okay?
Just say no to murder.
And there were some a lot of like religious overtones to it, like the SBTC, Saved by the Cross.
Yeah.
And the victory, which Episcopalians which she was very well known to use. It was a 1 Corinthians verse. Yeah. Talking about the victory of death.
Yeah. On top of it, the fact that there was never any other, like Linda Arndt was the detective involved, and she actually came, when she got there, they were waiting for more instructions from the kidnappers. It didn't state, where they were going to meet and all that stuff. A lot of people had gathered to help assist in getting the money together, and no other person ever called regarding the kidnapping itself. So that was a big to do. On top of it is the fact that there's this ransom note, but nobody ever contacts the family again.
Right. And she waited an hour after she woke up to call 911.
Right.
Which to me, if I'm waking up at 4, I'm probably not noticing shit.
I was about to say, I don't know if most parents check on their kids like when they first wake up in the morning. Sometimes they're like, I don't know. My parents were not like that. If they would get up, make coffee, get their stuff going, get moving, and then about the time they would be waking us up, they would wake us up because...
Well, she found the note, and that's what made her check on JonBenet.
Right.
So she found the note on the second floor landing. So she probably was rubbing her eyes, maybe didn't see it. It is the day after Christmas. There's probably paper and shit everywhere. Because right after they opened gifts, like, they attended parties all day.
But she was also found in the house. That's the other part, is like, if your kid's missing, you probably check all the rooms, not most of them.
Yeah.
Right.
And then when the detective told them to check the house, John Ramsey went right to the basement, right to the wine cellar, to the far corner that she was hidden in.
Yeah.
It isn't like he opened the door and, oh my God, she's in the doorway. She was in a far corner of a wine cellar.
Yeah, which they had known already that it hadn't been checked because nobody had gone in that room when they had done an initial inspection of the house. So there was a lot of other possibilities that they were talking about with the fact that it may have been the parents was that there was a lack of cooperation with law enforcement toward the latter end of the investigation. And the family initially said the reason why was because they did not want them to focus so hard on them that they missed out on the possibility that it was an intruder, because they always maintained it was an intruder.
Right. I mean, it makes sense, especially when they're the focus of the investigation. Right. I'm probably not going to invite you for coffee if you're saying, hey, you molested and murdered your daughter.
Right.
Huh. How do I answer that any other way except no?
Right. On top of it, there was a lot of conversation about the fact that there were no footprints found at the place where the broken window was located. There had been no movement of cobwebs or anything like that. We'll talk a little bit about that, but there was a lot of back and forth about how could this have been a possibility that the family couldn't have done it versus an intruder, because, I mean, other things that were found in the house was like there was a bowl of pineapple located on the counter with a spoon in it. It had the son, Burke's fingerprints on it.
And she had it in her stomach.
That's right, which the family stated that they had not fed her any pineapple the previous night. So there was a lot of questions of how did she end up with pineapple in her stomach if you guys weren't feeding it to her? Where did she get this bowl? You know, why is your son's fingerprints on it? What's going on? Because there was a lot of like unanswered questions that the law enforcement couldn't answer. So it was weird. But I mean, it was a huge media spectacle. If you lived in 96 for probably the first year or so, that's all you heard about every single day was the coverage of JonBenet Ramsey.
Well, and she had a boot print found beside her on the floor that didn't belong to anyone in the house.
Right.
But also the police couldn't talk to Burke. It's Burke, right?
Yeah.
Because they had to get him psychological treatment.
Right.
And the premise was he saw something that traumatized him. And he, in later interviews, has alluded to the fact that he's traumatized.
Right.
He doesn't know what he saw.
Yeah.
Or what happened.
I mean, for a long time, law enforcement maintained that he was never going to be considered a suspect.
Well, and CBS did that whole documentary.
Yeah.
What was it, in 2001?
It was more,
2016.
Yeah, it was a newer one. And I mean, the whole thing that they concluded was that Burke did it and the family covered it up. But you can kind of see how this
story... it almost convinced me. I'm always like, the son did it.
My thing was, like, if you were trying to find a new theory, like, I mean, everybody's been having theories for years about what happened to her because there's so many inconsistencies. Really, the initial problem is that the investigation was botched from the beginning. You know, any evidence that was located inside of the house was probably gone. And the biggest thing that has been a hang-up for a lot of law enforcement is the DNA evidence that had been found on her body and in her underwear. For years now, they've been talking about this DNA evidence. Actually, in 2009, the DA fully exonerated the Ramseys, stating that DNA did not match up with any of the Ramsey family. However, on the flip side, law enforcement that was very pro it was the Ramseys stated that you can't just completely eliminate somebody because there's DNA on a person. It could be, there was a lot of talk in the 2016 episode of the CBS episode talking about JonBenet Ramsey, that what it could be is that we have things called touch DNA. And it's if I just touch this table one time, you leave touch DNA and it could stay there. So that DNA could be from the manufacturing company. Somebody touched it.
You can't timestamp it.
Right.
You can't timestamp a fingerprint.
Or even sometimes you wash things. Fingerprints stay on it. If you've ever gotten a bowl out of a dishwasher, sometimes you still see fingerprints on it. I mean, there's no excluding it. So, but what they were able to identify is that it was male DNA, but they were never able to identify who exactly it was. So it's sort of been this long running thing about, was it an intruder? Was it the family? And this is just incidental DNA. There were signs of sexual assault, but they couldn't actually pinpoint the sexual assault, although it looks like her vaginal area had been washed previously.
Yeah, washed, and it looked like an abrasion.
Right.
So not penetration ripping from like you would expect, but like an abrasive.
Right. So the biggest thing that a lot of people, and I think a lot of people still have a problem with, and I think that's why it became such a hard stance. And I think there are a lot of people who still believe the Ramseys did it. The fact that she was in child beauty pageants was a huge factor for why a lot of people didn't like the Ramseys to begin with. I mean, they actually did an entire book called The Death of Innocence, talking about how they were falsely accused and all of this stuff. I mean, it's definitely not an O.J. Simpson situation where they're like, why did, if I could have, I would have done this kind of thing.
Yeah, and I would have gotten away with it too.
Yeah, but they maintained their innocence for forever. They actually were indicted in 1998 for what it was contributing to the death of a minor, which it was more so of a child abuse charge, where they said basically that they put her in danger of being dead, and obstruction of law enforcement. So at that time, they actually did indict them, and that a grand jury did true bill it, but the DA's office refused to sign the
She said, we can't prove this beyond a reasonable doubt. We're not wasting time and money.
No, especially because it's only probable cause you have to reach on an indictment. So a lot of people saw that as like, oh, DA's office is obstructing, the actual truth of it. But really the matter was, if you can't prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, you're just wasting your time. So, I mean, it was back and forth, even to the point where, like, Boulder police and the DA's office were going head-to-head on it. Boulder police always maintained that they believed it was the Ramseys who did it. There was a lot of controversy regarding the way they obstructed the investigation, how the things that just didn't make sense. And so they really thought that they had enough to at least charge them. But the DA's office and a lot of outside law enforcement really truly believed it was the intruder theory. And if you're not familiar with that, a lot of people on the other side believe what happened is that somebody actually did break into the house. It was a botched kidnapping, and that JonBenet was murdered. Like, she had been knocked in the head. And when they realized they couldn't get her out, they just killed her and left her in the basement. That theory that's one of the theories that, everybody can go back and forth on. But there was a lot of questioning about that, with the broken window. They didn't see any sort of mess up of the web or spider web and stuff like that. And, like, there was still dust. The thing is, a lot of people don't realize is that night there had been 2 unlocked windows because they had power cords running from where the Christmas lights were. So the windows were open. There was also an unlocked door into the house. So there was no need to break in if you were trying to get in the house. They actually had a door that somebody could open. There was also, if you're looking at crime data regarding the area, 100 burglaries had happened in the few months right before JonBenet was murdered. On top of that, 38 sex offenders lived in the 2-mile radius of where they lived. 2
of which were obsessed with either her or her family.
Yes.
And or her family.
Yes. And a lot of theories, which I really tend to believe this, is that because she had maintained such notoriety as a child beauty queen, that there were child pornographers and child predators and sex offenders who just knew who she was. It's one of those things where you just don't know, because it really could be either or. I know
the Ramsey's housekeeper was also considered a suspect, and that was mostly due to the fact that it was reported that she was kind of down on her luck and in need of money, and it would have made a lot of sense for her to know that John Ramsey would have had a $118,000 Christmas bonus coming in since she worked for them. So that number being so specific kind of made sense and kind of aligned with the idea that somebody would know how much money he would have. The other suspect that was named was actually named by his girlfriend. He was a reporter who was kind of obsessed with the story. He would get angry when questioned by police and ask why they weren't investigating it well. And he kind of was following the story very intently. At one point, it was reported that he actually had a sweatshirt that has SBTC on it, which was a tennis club. And that kind of led the idea that he could have possibly been the killer as well.
So it was real coincidental. This guy was rocking around with the same little hoodie that, was listed on the ransom note. So we need to talk a little bit about, though. And so in 2006, Patsy Ramsey actually passes away of ovarian cancer at the age of 49. Nobody's been arrested, anything like that. Coincidentally, 2 weeks later, somebody by the name of John Mark Carr comes up and says he's a guy from Thailand, and now he's a she. And he sends an email and confesses that he has killed JonBenet Ramsey. Initially, the investigation, they get him back. They start to question him. And there's just so many inconsistencies with the story about what happened with what he did versus what actually was found on JonBenet. He stated that he drugged her, dragged her, and killed her. There were no drugs located in the toxicology report of her autopsy. There was a lot of inconsistencies with what he he basically was saying. So they ended up releasing him. He is now a lady by the name of Alexis. He apparently, or she had gender reassignment of surgery. But apparently what now he does is he helps with survivors of abuse. But there's a lot of allegations that he actually is assisting in a child sex cult. Like, this is how he's getting closer to them, called the Immaculates. I was like, that makes a lot of sense. Apparently, he had, prior to this whole JonBenet thing, he had married a 14-year-old and a 16-year-old before. So he was a real creepazoid as it was, but he was never actually linked to JonBenet.
Creepers in Thailand, man.
I'm telling you. I was thinking when I read Thailand, I'm like, well, that makes a lot of sense.
I think that's where they caught Peter Scully, too.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a little bit more of a lax belief in, like, child crimes, I think.
I think it's just poor and there's no one to enforce anything. When the Interpol steps in, they hammer those assholes.
Yeah. No extradition, though, to the United States, I don't think.
So you just shoot them.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Who gives a shit? It's Thailand. The cops aren't going to do anything. They're clearly not doing anything already.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there was also a link that there was a guy who dressed as Santa Claus and that he was also obsessed with her. I mean, I think by like the first year of the investigation, they had 1,700 possible suspects linked to JonBenet Ramsey.
If you want to know how many pedos are out there, look at JonBenet's case, because there's a bunch of fucking perverts.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I love her. And it's like, well, she's 6 and you're a fucking creeper.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where I think she had small time fame in her town, and I think that was possibly a consequence of what ended up happening.
I couldn't tell you if we have beauty queen kid contests. What are they called?
Child beauty pageants?
Yeah, those things. I couldn't tell you if we have one here ever. I've
Yeah.
never even heard of one. So.
I didn't even know. I'll be honest. I mean, of course I knew about it with JonBenet Ramsey, but I didn't even know that was a thing that people believed in competing in. Like, she was crowned a beauty queen at the age of 4. At 4 years old, how do you have any sense of what you are doing in the first place? And I mean, when you look at her picture, I mean,
it's creepy.
It is creepy because of the makeup and the hair. And I mean, I had to do that in dance class and stuff, but those dance pictures were like for our little like yearbooks, like our little dance yearbooks.
Yeah, it wasn't like a pageant where they put them in bikinis and it models the Miss America pageant.
Yeah, it's weird.
It's real odd for children, like not even like 17, 18-year-old kids where they have like the junior Miss whatever.
Yeah, and the Miss Teen USA.
They're still not adults, but they're becoming women, so you kind of understand it a little bit more.
This is a 4-year-old.
These are 4 and 5. These kids should be running around with like rocks and eating shit off the ground. Like, what was that? Probably not good.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the controversy really surrounding her death was that I think a big portion of it regarding her parent is that her mother was putting her in these child beauty pageants, and that the only true explanation as to like you not realizing your child is dead is that you probably murdered her. Like, you want her to be such a big deal in the child idol world that you get mad at her and kill her.
What was a conglomeration of that? The handwriting, the fact that she was dead in the house and no one had checked this one room.
Yeah.
Like,
that was locked with 2 different...
It's just not a thing. Like,
well, I told Becky I was going to be devil's advocate about Patsy, because here's the other thing. She was depressed, and she was going through a manic depression, which they call it BPD now.
Yeah.
She was going through an episode. She was extremely stressed about all of her social obligations, the pageants and stuff, and JonBenet had a bedwetting problem. So one of the things that they found when they found her was she was saturated with urine.
She's also 6. So
she's 6.
When we say bedwetting problem, we mean she's a child.
She's a child, and it's normal.
Yeah.
But in Patsy Ramsey's mind, this was a huge problem. She couldn't get her to stop peeing in the bed. It was a real source of contention in the household. She talked about it at church. Like, how do you get your kid to stop, freaking wetting the bed?
They'll stop it when they grow out of it.
Exactly.
What?
And they probably are stressed out. Bedwetting actually happens more when you have a child that's stressed and traumatized.
And not only that, but she got up and ate pineapple, which is how much % water? Like, there's a reason you can make juice out of it.
Yeah.
So don't feed her and let her eat and drink. And how did you not know your kids were getting up? But the theory is that because the coroner said she could have died around 10, which is about the time Patsy and John got home from a Christmas party. That Patsy checked in on JonBenet, saw she'd peed the bed. So one of the other things JonBenet was found with was a slap across her cheek and a wound, a bruise on her shoulder, like she had been jerked.
Mm-hmm.
So they're thinking that she gets her up, you peed the bed, slaps her, grabs her by the shoulder, takes her to the bathroom, probably pushes her down. Boom, she hits her head. Like on the tub or the toilet or something. And she thinks she's killed her because she was unconscious. She probably wouldn't have survived that wound and been okay afterwards. Like, it was a debilitating
and there's no
injury.
like weapon that was ever found that explained what happened with her fracture in her head.
So she didn't just have a fracture. Like, she had a fracture, but her lobes were damaged. And, you know, once you get lobe damage, your brain doesn't heal itself.
Right.
It's damaged. So that was the theory. And then she's like, oh, my God, what am I going to do? And also, interestingly enough, the ransom letter mentions being tired. Like, get some rest because it's going to be exhausting. Like, she was giving herself a segue into being, I better sleep. Like, and it was just a lot of other things. Like, the ransom note refers to her as already being dead. Like, if you talk to even a stray dog, she dies. Instead of she will die, it's like she dies. And also on the tombstone, Patsy had put she died Christmas Day. They didn't date it the 26th. They dated it the 25th. Even though they're perpetrating to the police that she did not die at any time.
26th.
Yeah. So
and it was her paintbrush and her paper.
Her paintbrush, all the stuff she was familiar with. And her wine cellar, she was also known to drink quite heavily. And it just was really unusual. And it's like they were saying that maybe it took a couple of times to strangle her because, you know,
It's harder to strangle somebody than you think.
Yeah.
Well, I'm also thinking it's your child. Like, you're trying to, like, you're also strangling your child.
With the lobe damage, she may have basically been already not struggling, but, like, gone.
Yeah, she was unconscious when she was killed.
But it's still, it's tough to choke somebody unconscious.
Yeah.
Even, again, if she had a garrote and was...
And the white cord, it's not like a cord you could use for pulling stuff. It was a
nylon.
Yeah, it kind of looked like, to me, like from a dress or a nightgown. It was nylon cord. Also, the other thing about her wetting the bed, a lot of people, there was a good theory that so she wasn't penetrated. She had abrasions on her vagina that Patsy, you know, wiped her so hard she caused her to bleed. Because there's blood in her underwear. Yeah. That's not affiliated with, it was hers. So it's like, you know, that's a little unusual. So, and it honestly, it's the only thing that in a lot of people's mind really fits all the buckets.
The buckets.
I don't know. I remember when everything came out, I remember my dad being like, oh yeah, that bitch killed her daughter. I don't know if the dad was fucking or not, but she definitely killed her. And I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
I think there was 12.
I think that was like the lesser theory was that he was molesting her and then tried to cover it up. But the thing is, like,
or the mom caught him.
Mom caught him and they were covering it up and all this stuff. The other theory was that their son Burke was, I think he was autistic or was on the spectrum. This is what made me angry.
They're trying to protect him.
Yeah, he like got angry with her and hit her in the head, and they were covering up to protect him.
Right, when they were eating pineapple, he got angry and pushed her down, and she hit her head on the counter, kind of thing. And they were covering it up. Because the theory was like John Ramsey had already lost a daughter, and he didn't want to lose, and now he's lost another. He didn't want to lose the rest of his family. So they're saying like a man put in that position will defend, you know, a wife he knows killed somebody. I'm thinking, no. He probably would have sent that bitch down the river. Yeah. But if it was the son, then both parents would have done everything they could to protect that one remaining child.
Right. To me, the thing that makes the most sense, I mean, there's a lot of, like, the inconsistencies I think are very notable. I do kind of adhere to the intruder theory, and I wonder if it's somebody who actually knew the family and that they were trying to cover up for the person they knew.
Well, and maybe, like, the boot print, you also can't timestamp the boot print.
Right.
This person could have been breaking in, and because there was a male pubic hair found on her blanket, and it said it wasn't semen, but male bodily fluid, so I can only imagine it was, pre-cum or something?
Yeah, it just could have been pre-cum or...
I'm not really sure how that functions.
Yeah, the thing about DNA is it's changed, even from 96 to now, things have changed so much. So just to talk a little forensic, because I'm a nerd. Anyways, a lot of forensic prior to like the last few years, you had to be in the data system when forensics were done. So if a lot of people, you watch CSI and all that stuff, they type in the little data and it pops up and it's John Smith and that's the guy and he doesn't have any criminal history. It doesn't work like that. You had to actually be in a system. So a lot of convicted felons, that's why you fingerprint felons a lot of times so they can be tracked. A lot of people who work for the government are fingerprinted, but if you're not
any military,
if you're not
everything you own is on file.
Yeah, but if you're Joe Schmo who works in like a mid-level job in Atlanta who has no reason to ever be fingerprinted, you don't get put in any sort of data system that can be recognized. So probably what happened initially is they could identify that it was a male and that it was male species, but it could not be identified to anybody specific because there was nobody in the system.
Which species of male
the
was
male,
it?
like a male specimen.
There we go. A male species.
I know, a male species, a male specimen.
Of what? Was it a dog?
Yeah, a malish kind of animal, adjacent.
It was an animal that killed that poor girl. But there was also the theory about the family friend that was molesting her, and they kind of knew about it.
Yeah.
But he was a business partner of John, so they kind of was okay with it.
Yeah, so that kind of adheres to that idea. So the DNA they are able to like test the Ramseys because you can take buccal swabs at that point and test it and say, hey, that doesn't match up to anybody in the
right, and it didn't
family.
match anybody in the house.
Right.
They did prove that.
So as the years have gone by, there have been retesting of the DNA to see if there's anything more conclusive. It has not happened. Up until the last couple of years. So there's a lot more information now about touch DNA. There was prior to the to like the 90s at this point. Touch DNA is something that you can attribute to anywhere on a surface. Any of us is giving off touch DNA right now. So while we may not be involved in a murder, if your DNA is here, it could just be just regular old DNA that just happened to be here when it happened at the time. Now, which is to me the coolest thing, because we've had a couple of cold cases solved this way. They're wanting I believe his name was Lou Smith, his daughter and a couple of other investigators are trying to get the Boulder police to release the DNA for genealogical testing. So the way that works now is you would test the DNA and any family members or any ancestors that link back to that DNA, you may not be in the system, but if their family's in the system, which is like 23andMe, any of those systems, if it links back, they're able to actually follow now your family's history to get to who it is.
Right. And I was reading just today that John Ramsey said if Boulder Police Department won't do it, he's going to sue them. He's going to force them.
Yeah.
He's going to take it to court. Like, why wouldn't you want to know? But I guess because you can't make a copy. Like, if you send, or at least just send the paper results here. Here's what it,
Well, I think, I don't know. To me, I don't know if they're concerned about, like, the preserving the evidence at this point. Hey, I don't know. It makes no sense to me. But there's a lot of push to send that sort of off. It's very expensive, too, to do. But if it's something that's going to solve, like, a famous cold case, I think it's something you want to do. And, I mean, the Boulder police have always maintained that they believed it was the Ramseys. They really put down the DA's office for exonerating them in general. So if this is a possibility where you can see genealogical links to maybe even the Ramseys, hey, maybe it was a family friend and they knew about it. I mean, to me, it closes up a case, even if you say that the DNA, could destroy the DNA. At this point, this is like kind of a Hail Mary as it is. It's been 30 years almost. So, I mean, why not try this route at this point, in my opinion? I mean, it solved a rape case in our jurisdiction that had gone cold for 20 years.
We got the Golden State Killer.
Yeah. I mean, it works. So I know that a lot of people have been, it actually last week they were like, they could solve it within hours. And that is just not realistic whatsoever. But
DNA takes a minute.
DNA does take a minute, but it gives you at least somewhere to start. And this is one of those cases that have been considered cold cases, but are perpetually open. So there's new investigators on it. There's new people being interviewed. I do adhere kind of to the intruder theory because I think that what with the inconsistencies with the family, I think they probably knew who it was and they were either trying to cover it up or they just were the most fucking unluckiest family as it was, in my opinion.
That mom killed that baby.
She did. So, I mean, there's no way to ever know.
That mom killed that baby.
I think, Aunt, do you agree with that too, don't you?
Yeah. I mean, it makes so much sense.
I mean, it may have been a manic state. It may have been, maybe the dad wasn't fucking her. Maybe she just freaked the fuck out because she was obviously not a stable human being anyways, but that mom killed that baby.
As a kid who grew up in a house where things like wetting the bed was, I thought before that my mother was going to beat my oldest sister to death for wetting the bed. Like, I genuinely thought she's going to kill her tonight. Like, that's it. I can see it happening easily, like so easily.
Well, a federal court actually stated that people could not say that it was Patsy Ramsey's ransom note because the handwriting experts weren't actually experts. So they were like, you have to stop saying it at this point. It's not true anymore. So it's inconclusive as to whether it was her handwriting. I think that's my biggest, to me, if you take away the ransom note, there's enough, I think you can make an argument that somebody found the brush, broke it, used it as a garrote. They wrote the ransom note on their pen and paper because now it's a botched kidnapping. You know, they just stuffed her body in there. Maybe she woke up. Maybe they realized they couldn't get her out. Maybe it was actually later in the morning when she died. And they heard I can't always say Nancy Reagan. I don't know why. Patsy Ramsey moving around, and they just stuffed her body downstairs. Maybe they were going to assault her.
Yeah, maybe she got up too early.
So here's the thing, though. They didn't just stuff her body downstairs. They put it in a room that had a lock on it.
Yeah.
How did they
relocked it? Yeah.
Well, the lock was on the outside.
I understand that, but they still went in there, locked it. No one else bothered to check it. So it's not like even the cops were like, oh, okay. The parents would have checked the room. That's the thing. It's like, if your kid's missing, you look all
I see
over
what you're
the
saying.
house.
Yeah, I don't know. That's something that doesn't make a lot of sense either. I don't, it's one of those where I wish there had to be a logical explanation, but I don't think there is a logical, other than
that bitch was crazy.
Yeah, let me tell you, one time when we were kids, I think my brother was like 3 years old, he went missing. He was gone. And not only did I have to get under the house and crawl through the cold cellar, I had to go out to the chicken pen. I mean, she sent us everywhere. He ended up being in the closet asleep on blankets. But, like her closet, where we were never allowed.
Right.
That's where he was. I mean, sound asleep.
And they still found him in that closet.
Yes, because we didn't stop looking. And, I mean, I'm talking about, I was in the pastures. I had to face down a bull to see if he was out there. She's like, go look in the pasture, go into the house.
Well, I think on the flip side, you can also say, let's say you got a couple of dumbasses for parents, okay? You get a note that says, I've kidnapped your child. Are you going to go looking through the house? Or are you going to initially think, I'm calling the police right now, and then we will handle everything else?
I mean, yeah, I would have called right now.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But I still would have looked.
You call right away, but you also... Someone that killed her wouldn't have, especially if it was just somebody on the outside, why would they have taken the time to write a ransom note?
A 2.5 page ransom note.
You just fucking leave.
Yeah. I think my other thing...
That literally said nothing. The ransom note said nothing.
On the flip side, you're the one that calls the police. You're the one that sets up this elaborate ransom note thing. Wouldn't you think if you were trying to convince people she was kidnapped, you would have taken her body somewhere? So
here's the thing. I think he probably called the police. The dad.
I mean, it says Nancy. God damn it. Patsy was the one that called the police.
I would be willing to bet he did or made her do it. Again, you don't write a ransom note for someone you know is dead.
Yeah.
Unless you're trying to make people think she's not dead.
But that's sort of my thing. You don't
hide a body in the house if you can possibly get it the fuck out without being seen.
But that's what I'm saying, too, for the parents. They have all of the time in the world. Let's say she does die at 10 o'clock at night. You decide, we got to do something. We got to get her out of the house. Get her out. We are in the time before security cameras everywhere. Take her body, go dump it somewhere.
Yeah, but maybe he didn't know. Also, remember, she was in a BPD episode.
It's also Christmas. There are Christmas parties everywhere.
I still think, but then that would even give you
lights
more.
Are on.
I was about to say, though, but that would even give you more reasons to be nondescript. You could be like, hey, we went to a Christmas party. Or, hey, we were getting home late.
No. Hey, we're moving this oriental rug out at 2 a.m. Don't mind us.
I just think it just I can see it from both ways though. That's what I'm trying to say. Like there's argument to be made for both. I think, honestly, because.
Well, and CBS made a good argument for it to be Burke, but since he sued them for multiple millions and settled, I'm not going to accuse him on this podcast.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I don't got millions
good,
of dollars.
Buddy, you
good.
Now, do I think he saw something and is traumatized? Yes.
Probably.
I think that something severely traumatized him.
And he may have seen old girl choking her the fuck out. Like,
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's not how I get boners anymore.
Well, there's the other funny, ironic thing. It's not really funny, but the ironic thing is, John Ramsey, after Patsy Ramsey died, he married Natalie Holloway's mom. So that's a whole nother. Yeah, did you know that? Yeah, he married Natalie Holloway's mother.
Well, they know about grief.
That's how they met. Is they had like the missing and exploited children, murdered victims, stuff like that. They met, and that's sort of how they bonded over. Having a daughter, both of them having 2 daughters, one murdered, one probably murdered, but still missing. Yeah. Ooh, Natalie Holloway's creepy as hell. That story. No, the story itself is creepy.
Yeah, she's not. Her story is.
She was a very nice lady, it seemed like.
Yeah, I don't think she meant to die, but she may not be dead. She could have been sex trafficked and is in Thailand too, for all we know.
Yeah, she's probably dead at this point.
Yeah, she probably
even if
gone.
she were sex trafficked.
True. But yeah, so it'll be interesting to see what comes of this DNA if they do it. I really do hope they do. I think that this is one of those stories that it's kind of gone on forever, and it's like we're 30 years out. We should have the technology to test this and find out who did it.
Kind of makes you want to be like, okay, there's statute of limitations, just who did it?
Yeah.
Come tell us.
Murder doesn't have a statute of limitations, though.
That's
why I said you wish.
Get rid of it.
Yeah.
God. That would suck.
Well, then you have your vigilante justice take over.
I would admit to shit I never did. Like, I shot Lincoln. Fuck that guy.
I think you could do that now and be okay with it.
I used to have a guy for my lawn, but not anymore.
I don't know. And then Angie's prevailing theory is that she's actually Katy Perry.
No, it's not mine. It is a theory on the internet, a conspiracy theory.
It's a bad one.
She's Katy Perry.
That would actually be kind of funny. Like the entire time she's like Anastasia in that cartoon movie.
She was so famous she had to fake her own death.
Yes.
Like Avril Lavigne.
Yeah.
Oh my God. So yeah. I mean, there is a ton of specials on JonBenet. I mean, this is one of the stories that have probably been most overdone, but maybe we're a few weeks out from finally finding out what happened. What?
Oh, the mom choked her to death and then had the body.
I just wish at this point, like, if you want to do that, charge the parents.
I'm a big fan of charging the mom. I want to dig her ass up and throw shit at her.
Well, she's dead now. I mean, my thing is, like, if she's
ridiculous.
dead, I think the dad would come forward and be like, hey, it was my wife.
No, because he
might not know.
He would still have charges pressed
that's
against
true.
him. He can't do that.
And even if he didn't know, they're going to say there's no fucking way you didn't know.
That's
And
true.
You're an accomplice to murder.
Golly. This is why we need time travel. Have like a little time traveler just pop in to see what happened and be like, yeah.
Oh, and then your DNA's there.
Oh, that got the time traveler's DNA. They're not even born yet. That's why they can't figure out who it is.
We definitely don't need DNA time travel.
Yeah. I want to know. I want to know what love is. But not that way. Anyway, so yeah, that is JonBenet Ramsey. If you hadn't heard of her, I'm surprised. If you forgot about her, hey, I mean, it's one of those things that
She's been dead for a while.
she'd been dead. And
happy birthday, JonBenet.
yeah, it would have been your 31st.
32nd.
32nd. I can't math. Listen, Nancy Reagan, calm down.
Also, if you're listening and you have your kids in beauty pageants, you're a fucking creeper.
Me, that's 100% the truth. I think, like, if you do anything that makes either sexualizes your child. Listen, I had to go to a training that was like child cyber crimes, and some of the stuff I saw there, y'all, that's disgusting, y'all. You do not need to sexualize any of your children. It's gross. And I'm going to tell you this, if you post your pictures of your children on Facebook, sitting in bathtubs and stuff, I 100% believe there are predators out there looking for those pictures.
Yeah,
So-
absolutely. You find them on Reddit.
Yeah. People...
My grandma thought it was real funny to show her girlfriend ever had pictures of my wiener when I was in the bathtub when I was like 2.
Yeah.
Look at this little schmeckle. I'm like, thanks.
There's a woman
horrible.
there's a
Grandma.
woman on a
Schmeckle.
Facebook group that we're a part of, and she always posts pictures of like her baby who's like a model and stuff, and I'm like, you are getting yourself targeted But you want to talk about getting yourself targeted? People will find your shit.
Yeah.
Like, and they will find where you live. And if there's a child predator looking for a baby, they're going to go after that baby. It creeps me out when people post pictures of their babies and their little kids, especially like if
I
they're.
don't mind when they're like, we went on a picnic and they have like the family.
Yes.
Like, that's whatever. But when they're like, here's little Sadie in her first bath, I'm like, that's real weird that you're showing people this.
Yeah. Like, you don't need to, nobody needs to see that.
Here's the circumcision photos.
Here's my placenta after birth.
We had the bris. The moil went a little aggressive.
Oh, God. But, yeah, if you put your kid out there, I mean, there are a lot of dangers out there. Child predators, there's a ton of them.
Yeah, there's a bunch of perverts. Stop letting people ogle your childrens.
And if you're putting your child in a position of being sexualized, you are contributing to the problem. I'm very open to a lot of things. I think child beauty pageants are gross.
So I won't say you're contributing to the problem. What I will say is you're making them an easier target to find.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
The problem exists whether or not they're putting these kids in bikinis or not, because there's fucking perverts. However, you're making them real easy to find.
Yep. It's gross, man.
And again, if there's money that changes hand, there's tax paperwork, which means they can track you down.
Yep. I mean, all they got to do is, like, Google it. Like, oh, this child was a blah, blah. Get the name. Look it up. They can look up your
They'll
Facebook.
have all the contestants, and then you can find your parents, and then, hey, guess who lives there?
Yeah. It's not hard.
That kid I'm apparently going to kidnap.
It's gross. Well, all right, Chi. Thanks, guys. Have a nice day.
Love you. Stop putting your kids in pageants, you fucking creeps.
That's right.
Yeah.
Nancy Reagan.
Bye.